In 2015, Sony discontinued repairs for AIBO, its robotic dog. AIBO wasn't a real dog, it was a machine. It had circuits instead of organs, sensors instead of eyes, and a battery life instead of a heartbeat. And yet, when the repairs stopped and the robots started dying one by one, owners in Japan began holding funerals for them. Full funerals, with Buddhist priests, with incense, with eulogies for a dog that had never been alive. The people who attended these funerals knew AIBO wasn't real. They said so themselves. They knew they were grieving a machine, and they grieved it anyway. If you want to understand where the relationship between humans and pets is going, and what future generations might think about how we do this right now, that funeral is probably the most honest place to start. Today, we have 94 million households in the United States alone that own at least one pet. The American pet industry is projected to hit $165 billion in spending this year. That's more than the GDP of many countries. We spend it on food, on veterinary care, on medication, on birthday cakes that the animal cannot read the candles on therapists specifically trained to treat pet anxiety, and on coffins. Most of us don't question any of this. It just feels normal. It feels like what you do when something is part of your family. But here's the question worth sitting with. Is what we're doing now, specifically now, in 2026, actually a stable endpoint for how humans relate to animals? Or is it one very specific, very strange moment in a much longer story that hasn't finished yet? Let's look at how strange it already is from the outside. We take animals that evolved to hunt, to roam, to have territories measured in square miles, and we put them in apartments. We feed them food engineered in laboratories. We dress some of them in clothes. We celebrate their birthdays. We make them subjects of legal disputes in divorce proceedings. A court in Delaware recently ruled that dogs are not furniture, which tells you something about the fact that someone needed a court to say that. We also, and this is the part that gets overlooked, keep them specifically because we need them, not for work, not for food, not for any practical reason that previous generations of humans would have recognized. We keep them because being near them makes us feel better, because they sit with us when we're sad, because they don't judge us and they're always there. That is a deeply human need being met by a non-human. And it works. The oxytocin studies, the loneliness research, the data on pet ownership reducing cardiovascular risk. It works in ways that are biologically real and measurable. The question future humans might ask is not whether the need was real. The question is whether the specific solution we chose was the only possible one. Because here's what's already happening right now. In 2026, the robot pet market is worth $1.8 billion and growing at over 20% annually. And these aren't the stiff plastic toys of a decade ago. The newest models have what engineers are calling predictive empathy. They scan your facial expressions, monitor vocal tones, and move toward you offering comfort before you've asked for it. Not because they feel anything, but because they've learned, through machine learning, what comfort looks like in response to distress. A robot that walks toward you when you look sad, that remembers what you said yesterday, that adjusts its behavior to your routines without being told. There's also Paro, a robotic seal developed in Japan and now used in hospitals and care homes across the United States. It responds to touch. It has movable eyes and neck muscles. Patients who use it know and will tell you directly that it is not real. They know it is a machine, and then they name it, and they talk to it. And when staff have tried to take it away, patients have become distressed in ways that are clinically significant. Patients who know it isn't real are distressed when it's removed, because at some point, the knowledge that something isn't real stops mattering as much as the feeling it creates, which is, if you think about it, not entirely different from what we already do with pets. The uncomfortable version of that thought is this: we already love things that cannot fully understand us back. We already form bonds with creatures whose inner experience we can't access and whose behavior we sometimes misread completely. We pour enormous emotional investment into animals that, depending on the species, may or may not be capable of experiencing anything we'd recognize as affection in return. And it works. It genuinely works. The bond is real even when it's asymmetrical. So when future generations look back at the early 21st century, they might see something that surprises us. They might not think we were wrong to love our pets. They might just wonder why we were so committed to the idea that the love had to be directed at a biological animal specifically, or they might see something else entirely. Because here's the other direction this could go. As cities get denser and apartments get smaller, researchers at the University of Melbourne have published papers arguing that owning a large dog in an urban apartment is objectively not good for the dog. That we are, in many cases, meeting our own emotional needs at the expense of the animal's quality of life. That the dog who sits alone in 600 square feet for 9 hours while its owner works might not be having the experience we imagine it's having. Future generations might look back at what we call pet ownership and see something closer to what we see when we look at Victorian-era zoos. Not cruelty in the obvious sense, but a relationship defined more by the keeper's needs than the kept animals, a love that was completely genuine and also, at a structural level, not quite fair. That version of the future doesn't have robot pets replacing real ones. It has real animals with legal recognition living in sanctuaries or communal spaces where humans can visit and form bonds without the 24-hour ownership model we currently treat as default. Both futures are being actively researched and debated right now. By ethicists, by veterinarians, by roboticists, by animal welfare researchers. The conversation about what the relationship between humans and animals should look like is genuinely open in a way it hasn't been before. So, the next time you look at your dog sleeping on your couch or your cat judging you from across the room, it might be worth asking a question most people never think to ask. Not whether you love them. That part is obvious. But whether the arrangement you both ended up in is the best version of what this relationship could be. The bond might be one of the most genuinely human things we do. The form it takes is just history. And history, as this channel keeps discovering, has a way of looking very different once enough time has passed. There's one more thing worth saying before we leave this topic, because it reframes everything we just covered in a way that's hard to shake. Every generation thinks the way they do things is the natural way, the obvious way, the way that simply makes sense, and every generation, without exception, turns out to be wrong about at least some of it. People who kept animals chained in backyards thought they were being responsible pet owners. People who declawed cats thought they were being practical. Neither of those things is considered acceptable in the same way today, and we're only 1 or 2 generations removed from both of them being completely normal, which means the honest answer to the question in this video's title isn't really yes or no. It's that we're almost certainly doing something right now with the best intentions that a future generation will look back at and quietly wince about. We just don't know which part yet. The love is real. It has always been real. That's probably the thing that survives. What changes is the shape of it. And if the last few thousand years of humans and animals sharing space is any kind of guide, the shape still has a long way to go.